This is Python's Paradise. This is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena, straight out of Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. And folks, here we are, April the 3rd, 2023. And we are celebrating, of course, a book that I have in my possession, disappearing in my background. But my guest has it, so that works. I have Sackhead, the definitive retrospective on Friday the 13th, part 2. And I've been reading this uh, reading this at work because I work at the hospital as a housekeeper. And then when I'm on breaks, I read this book and really enjoying it. And I have the author, R.G. Henning himself, or as I'll call him, Ron. How do you do, Ron?
You know what? I'm doing great. I can't thank you enough for having me on your podcast. I'm a fan. I've watched some of your material, as you already know. And so, as one fanboy to another, thanks for letting me be here, man. It's a pleasure. The honor's all mine.
Actually, I didn't know until I reached out that my name is in this book.
I didn't. I honestly. So, just for your viewers or your listeners, I'll just say this. So Greg reached out to me, wanted to do an interview. He's making his way through the book. I got to ask real quickly, how far along are you?
I'm right up to Amy Steele.
Oh, okay. All right, good.
Yep.
So Greg reached out to me, wanted to have me on his podcast. I was like, okay, to be honest with you, the book's been out for now 3+ months. And I normally was probably going to pass on it, but I recognized the name. And I was trying to think, wow, I know that name. And then I did a little research and I realized oh my goodness, of course I know the name because his podcast, Greg's podcasts, have been invaluable to me in 2 particular chapters in the book Sackhead, the definitive retrospective, because I actually drew upon a couple of his podcasts with Bill Randolph, with Warrington Gillette. And so how could I say no? I was indebted to you. So thank you for having me.
Well, you know what? The pleasure is all mine, and I'm honored. I looked through this, like my name's in this.
So also for the viewers and listeners, so that they know. So when I had responded back and I said, well, I cite your podcast some 5 different times throughout the book, various podcasts. I'd be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to be on the show. So thanks for having me.
You know what? I'm quite honored. My history with this, of course, this was the first one in the franchise I ever seen because I had an uncle that used to own a video store. Yeah. And I was afraid of horror movies at the time. And my cousins were watching Friday the 13th, part 2. And of course, I'm one of these people, like I grew up watching stuff like Conan the Barbarian and Beastmaster and there's no way these people will be cowering from Jason,
How old are you?
I am going to be 51 in July.
Okay, so I'm 52. So we're the exact same generation because all of those movies resonate with me. And I remember where I was when I saw them. So, okay.
Well, part 2, when it came to Kirsten Baker going nude into the lake doing her skinny dip, that was where Mom came in and turned the television off. And needless to say, Kirsten Baker became the first woman I ever seen naked.
Yeah, right.
Russell Todd told me if I ever get a chance to talk to her, she'd probably love to hear that story.
Well, the thing about it is, I'm sure you're not alone. I actually, I don't mean to steal the microphone from you, but I actually got to meet Kirsten Baker on 2 different occasions and got to work with her. I volunteer for C&V Promotions that's spearheaded by a familiar name on social media, Stacy Lee.
I know who she is.
Yep. Yeah, they represent pretty much a lot of the Friday the 13th part 1 and part 2 and part 3 cast and part 4 for that matter. And I got to meet Kirsten Baker in Chicago and first in Atlanta in 2001 and then in Chicago a few months later. First in Atlanta, then in Chicago. And an absolute sweetheart, Kirsten Baker is. Have you met her before?
I haven't. I'd like to though, because I'd love to have her on.
She's a rare autograph. She's a rare autograph. She doesn't do a lot of conventions for reasons not worth getting into. I think I just saw an advertisement, as you would say in Canada, or an advertisement, as we say here, she's going to be in London at another convention coming up here, so that's kind of cool. But I got to meet her. She's an absolute sweetheart. In fact, little piece of trivia for your listeners: she was the first chapter I wrote in the book.
Oh,
And yeah, and I wrote her chapter, and I wasn't sure it was going to be a book just yet. And after I finished it, and so I think her chapter is chapter 9 or something like that. And so I don't write sequentially. And when I wrote her chapter, I thought, you know what, I'm going to continue doing this because I was basing it off of my conversations with her, my interviews with her, basically. So real absolute sweetheart. And I can imagine you're not the only one whose first naked woman was probably Kirsten Baker. I'm not far removed. Again, you and I are the same age, and I was 11 or 12 when I first saw the movie. So on Showtime.
there you go. It was Showtime, all right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've got the box set here too, and here's my Friday the 13th part 2.
There you go. I got it. There
disappearing.
it is. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, I got Warrington
Well,
Gillette is on here, and I've had him on the show. I've got Law Marie Taylor, who was an absolute sweetheart. Amy
well,
Steele is on there.
you know what I feel like right now? I feel like we're in the movie Jaws when they're comparing scars. I don't know if you remember the scene in Jaws where Quint and Hooper are sharing scars, right?
Yep,
So I
yep.
have to show your audience my latest keepsake.
Oh, look at
This is
that.
the script, the original script for Friday the 13th Part 2.
Mm-hmm,
It is actually signed by Amy Steele.
mm-hmm.
She makes these available at the conventions. They're not cheap, but they're worth it. $100 with her autograph. She signs it for you. You won't. I don't know if you can see this, but the pages are actually color coded based on rewrites.
Uh-huh.
And this script actually contains her notes, including her last dialogue with Jason, where she's pretending to be Pamela, his mother, and her notes about changed dialogue and whatnot. So this is the actual script for Friday the 13th Part 2. This is the latest addition to my collection that I just picked up last month at Monster Mania, working with her at that convention. So sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder
Oh,
because
no, go for it.
that DVD signed by the cast is awesome. One other thing I got to show, since we're showing scars here, right?
Sure.
This was a picture of me with Amy, along with Adrian King.
Mm-hmm,
Dana Kimmel was supposed to be there from Part 3, but she had to cancel. You have Kimberly Beck, and
mm-hmm.
then you have Melanie from Part 5. These are the final girls from the first 5, minus Dana Kimmel, who was supposed to be there. And this is a pride and joy for me. This was a bucket list item. So,
How beautiful was Melanie Kinnaman in person?
yeah, you know what? A real sweetheart. Real sweet. I didn't get to work with her directly, but I talked with her briefly behind the scenes, which was to say, I said hi. I'm a little bashful, but she was very gracious with me. And then we ended up following each other on Instagram. So at least I made a friend. I hope to meet her and get to know her in the future. So.
Yeah, I've had her on here a couple times, and yeah, she's gorgeous.
Now, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
How did you stumble upon my book, if you don't mind me asking?
You know what? It was Tommy Kovac
Mhm.
put this out there to me, and I looked it up. And Tommy Kovac, of course, from Splat from the Past, and he and I have thrown names back and forth to each other for interview guests. And I did not know that there was a definitive retrospective on Friday the 13th Part 2. And I listen to Sean Clark regularly, and he's got your book.
Yes, yeah. I
Yep.
sent that to him. Yeah.
Yeah, but you didn't send one to Chris.
No, I did not. I did not.
I got to hear that. Anyway, and I've had Sean on here a couple times, but that was how I come to discover this, and I'm enjoying the read so far.
Okay.
I've had
Okay.
5 people from this particular movie on.
Yeah.
I've had Warrington Gillette on. I had
Which
Adrian
is
King.
which I actually quote in the book from your
Mhm.
podcast. Yep.
Yeah, I had him. I've had Adrian King has been on. She was actually my second ever guest. And I had Russell Todd's been on, Bill Randolph's been on, and Laura Marie Taylor.
Did you say
So
Amy? Did you say you had Amy Steele?
I never had Amy Steele, and I have a
She's a
feeling
hard catch.
I would like to get her, considering I spent money on her at her table, but
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a co-producer on Victim No More. I figured that was a good sell,
Yeah.
but
Right.
so I hate buying autographs from people if they don't do my show.
I understand.
I have kind of a problem with that. It's like, do my show and I'll show my support.
Well,
And I've always had a bit of,
a
yeah.
recommendation I can make to you
Hmm.
is I have struck up a pretty decent rapport with Amy as a volunteer for CNV Promotions. But if you know Stacy Lee on social
Hmm.
media, she is her convention agent, Amy
Hmm.
Steele's convention agent. And all things typically funnel through her. Although I know you probably got Russell on and Lauren Marie Taylor on, but for via other channels. But if you want to get Amy Steele, I would recommend talking with Stacy. She might be able to make that happen if you're hitting some brick walls. Okay, for future reference.
Yeah.
No guarantees, but that would be my recommendation. So Stacy has worked wonders for me. We are friends in as much as colleagues. So I work for her, volunteer for her, but beyond that, I actually dedicated the book to her.
Okay.
Because were it not for her, I wouldn't have had access to the cast, which later on spawned the idea for the book. I never intended to write a book. I've written books before, don't get me wrong, but I never intended to write this book. And were it not for Stacy and our budding friendship, and her allowing me to participate and hang out with her at some of these cons, the book would never have come to fruition. So I would recommend talking to her if you want to get to Amy Steele.
I'd love to get Amy Steele on. I remember, though, when I met her, the first question I asked her was, what was it like to kick Jason in the balls?
That's one question I never asked her. Yeah.
Well, she does give him a shot.
She does. She does. One of the things that if you talk to Amy Steele about part two, and I actually mentioned this in her chapter, and I know that you're still reading it, so
Hmm.
no spoilers here, but probably the most memorable thing for her in part two, and she's on record stating this in multiple ways and on multiple occasions, but it's that climax, the climactic scene between her and Warrington Gillette, or unmasked Jason. Hey, Kitty.
Look at this. This is Skittles. Skittles keeps all the mass of either Sackhead or hockey mask killers out of my apartment. As
There
long
you
as I
go.
give them, long as I give them treats.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, there you go. But Amy Steele's on record as saying that scene was the most difficult to shoot. She had to shoot it 3 times. It scared the bejesus out of her. It was hard on her emotionally as an actress, and that's one of the most visceral memories that she has. So we spent some time on it in the chapter, on her chapter in the book, obviously. So
Yep. I had some fun meeting and talking. Bill Randolph, I thought, was funny to interview because of a very, I shouldn't use the word perverse, but I love talking Dress to Kill because I'm a huge fan of that movie.
I remember I watched that entire 3-hour podcast.
Oh,
Yeah,
well, I had fun talking to him. I had
yeah.
no idea where the directions that interview
Well,
was going to
but you know
go.
what though, to your audience, so that your audience knows that 3-hour conversation you had with him was not a chore for him. He's a friendly man, as you learned.
Oh, I love
Uh,
him. Yes.
he's filled with stories. He loves to talk, and when he talks to you, you're the only person in the room, and time loses its meaning. And so it didn't surprise me that you guys went 3 hours.
Yep. Yep. He was great. Marie Taylor, absolute doll to meet in person. And
She's the real deal.
yep, she is the real deal. Warrington Gillette, I really enjoyed meeting. I was trepidatious when I first interviewed him because I knew about the controversy between he and
Steve Dash.
Steve Dash. I'm sorry, his name was escaping me. I never did get Steve on here. He passed.
Yeah.
But I met him at Frightmare in the Falls, Warrington, and had a great report with him. And I feel bad about what's gone on with that. It kind of reminds me of the whole situation with Tony Moran with the Michael
Yeah.
Myers situation right now.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah.
let me just say this about Warrington Gillette for your audience. So the book Sackhead, the definitive retrospective on Friday the 13th Part 2.
Hmm.
It's not meant to be a salacious book. It's
No.
not meant to be it's meant to be a celebration of a movie that I consider to be one of the best in the series, if not the best, certainly one of the best, and my personal favorite, as well as a beloved one. However, you cannot write a retrospective on Part 2 without dealing with the controversy between Gillette
Yep.
and Dash. And as you are on chapter 4 or 5 right now, then you have made it through chapter 3 where I talk about it.
Oh yeah.
I tried to be as respectful as I possibly could. However, having said that, I had to be honest about it. And to a certain degree, Warrington Gillette, who I have met on a number of occasions, and he's very gregarious, he's outgoing, he's very affable, he's engaging. No pretense with him. He loves to talk with people, so I commend him for it. However, that being said, Steve Dash is the Jason of Part 2. And there's a reason why the controversy exists. There's a reason why Steve Dash confronted Gillette the way that he has. And I'll just say this. I had to deal with that in chapter 3. I tried to be as respectful as possible. But at the end of the day, there's some embellishments, some misremembering on Gillette's part that had to be corrected. So I'll just leave it at that. Other than that, it's a celebratory book. It's not a salacious one, but you can't call it the definitive retrospective without dealing with that particular controversy. So
Yes, absolutely. Well, let's talk about some of the people. Actually, I'm going to ask this question.
okay.
How did you first get into the scene?
So I've been in the scene since 1981
Oh,
in terms of
wow.
in terms of being a fanboy and really salivating on slasher films. I grew up with Friday the 13th and the Halloween films, right? Not so much a big Nightmare on Elm Street guy because the big four: Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, Chainsaw or Leatherface, excuse me. And now you have Ghostface and others. And that's fine. But I've always been into slasher horror movies. I am a twin. My twin brother and I have always been into it. In terms of really getting into it, like going to conventions and for crying out loud, writing books, or collecting merchandise and autographs. I have a confession to make. I'm a latecomer. I didn't start getting into it to that degree until 2018, 2019, in my late 40s.
Wow, after me.
Yeah.
Lisa Langlois from class of 1984 has become a really good friend of mine, and she invited me to my first convention in Toronto.
Yep.
I've assisted her twice now. And what's funny is that number one, I got a taste of Toronto, which one day I hope to make my home.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, I fell in love with the convention scene, and it just
Yeah.
opened up some doors for me.
Yeah, I really love the convention scene.
Yeah. Who was the first person you ever met at a convention?
Well, I worked them. I didn't
You
go
worked them.
Yeah. And the first person I worked with, are you ready?
Okay.
Bill Randolph.
Ah.
Yep. I sat with him on a Friday night.
Mm-hmm.
And then next to him was Russell Todd. And so I kind of struck up a rapport with Russell. Then that Saturday, I sat with John Fury and Amy Steele. And then that Sunday, I think I was with Amy again. Yeah. So that was my first convention. I've never gone as a spectator. That's not true. I went to Monster Mania last year as a spectator to meet Steve Miner.
Okay.
In costume, and I wanted to get some autographs, so I cosplayed as well. But I met him. My wife and I we made the drive from New Hampshire to New Jersey just to go meet him. I was in there. I'm not kidding you. I was in there, Greg, for 10 minutes. No, that's not true. I was there for half an hour. I was just there to meet him, get his signature, and get out of there and meet and get a picture with him. And now that was before I had any inkling of writing a book. Had I known I was going to write a book on his movie, I would have picked his brain in significant ways. Instead, what I had to do when I wrote the book was rely on some archival interviews that are rare, that I was able to dig up here, there, and everywhere, including Fangoria magazine from 1981. But that being said, that's the only time I went as a spectator. Every other time I've been as a volunteer with the talent.
You've never had him interviewed for the book, huh?
No, he's
Oh.
he's a tough one. He's a tough one to land. You think Amy Steele's difficult? Steve Miner's a tough one to land. He's a busy guy. So I like I said, had I known what I know now, he would have been gracious because I did pick his brain about some other movies that he directed actually, and he was very forthcoming, very forthcoming. I just didn't have it. I already knew everything about his movie. I mean, that's why I wrote the book, because I already had this tribal knowledge, because I did at one time. I created a Facebook group called Packanack Lodge, Friday the 13th Part 2. And so I was running daily segments of trivia and behind the scenes and all kinds of stuff. So I knew his movie, so I didn't ask him any questions about Friday the 13th Part 2, like what happened to Paul. I already knew what his answer was to that. So
I
instead,
know. You want me to tell you my theory on Paul?
you tell me your theory and then I'll tell you the reality, okay?
I think in part 3, where Abel has the eyeball and he says there's other parts of the body, I think that's Paul.
I heard you say that before, and I think that is a winsome theory. I can get behind that. I can, because I do believe Paul's dead, and I thought that is a really good I like that. I like that explanation. So I'm not going to argue with you on that one.
That's my theory. I did have one question. I've heard various answers to this. Did Sean Cunningham have any involvement at all with part 2? Because I
Okay.
know Susan was involved, but as an editor.
Yeah, that was a quid pro quo that Sean Cunningham made with Steve Miner. So I'm going to give you my answer as in the best way that I know it. Okay. I don't think he had anything whatsoever to do with Friday the 13th Part 2. In fact, Lauren Marie Taylor told me that she never even saw him on set. Although I think it was at the premiere or at a gathering of some sort, he introduced himself to her and said that he hadn't seen her since filming on the set. Although, and I suggested to Lauren Marie, I said, I think he was being courteous. I don't think he was ever on the set. He doesn't remember anything about it. Heck, I don't even think he remembers much about part 1, to be honest with you. But no, I don't think he had anything. That was all Steve Miner, Ron Kurtz, and Dennis Murphy, the producer. Those are the guys who were really the principal filmmakers. And there are others. His wife played a role, absolutely. But Sean Cunningham, he was one and done, really. So,
yep. I gotta say though, my favorite Jason was Ted White. I gotta say, and I am wearing the T-shirt.
yeah. Hey, look,
I got an autographed hockey mask by him too.
I know, and that's awesome. I'm not going to argue with you about Ted White because he is a good Jason. I will be honest with you. I think the Jason that I have nightmares about, and I'm actually writing about this as we speak, but the Jason the Jason that I have nightmares about, it's not Ted White and it's not Steve Dash. It is Richard Brooker. That's the Jason that scares me to death. And when I have nightmares that Jason's chasing me, it's always that incarnation, that version. I love Ted White. And I'm the guy that recognizes the first 4 Friday the 13th as the creme de la creme. You can have the rest, maybe the remake. I don't mind the remake.
I gotta say, I'm a huge fan of Jason Lives.
I know, and many people are. Yeah. I think most polls show that as the fan favorite. I loathe it because to me, no, he's white. Now I don't loathe it. I'm being provocative for a reason. I shouldn't do that. I actually really enjoy C.J. Graham, but I don't like Zombie Jason. The first 4, the first 4 took themselves very seriously. Whether or not they came off that way is another story, but they took themselves seriously. Part 5, we won't talk about. Part 6 and beyond became a caricature of itself. And I actually kind of write about this in the early chapters of Sackhead, the book, how Jason had turned from a serial killer into a cartoon, from a monster to an action hero, so to speak. And what I loved about part 2 and Ted White's version and Richard Brooker's version is that you had a very sober serial killer, and that's what he was. And he was meant to scare, not draw laughs. And he was meant to spook, not entertain. So, anyways, that's just me. So,
I agree with you.
I'm in the minority on that because I'm showing my age. See, we're the same age, so you're probably going to agree with me. But you talk to a 30-something-year-old, and they think I'm out of my mind. So, it is what it is.
No, I agree with you. I want to talk about. By the way, did you sweat when you were sitting with Amy Steele?
Very much so, and she's very disarming. She's very disarming. She's very. I mean, all of these guys are really great. She will disarm you and just make you feel at ease, but still, you're in the presence of horror royalty. How can you not sweat? And we're on a first name basis, she and I. But I have a certain reverence for her. So I'm not as goofy as I am with everybody else. I tend to button up my collar just a little bit when I'm with her.
I wear a cup.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I get the reference.
Yeah, but and of course some people are already gone. Jack Marks we lost recently.
Yeah.
And Walt Gorney is gone, and Tom McBride gone.
I got a great story about Jack Marks that's in the book. Okay.
Oh, great.
I'm not gonna. Well, I'll whet the listener's appetite.
I know he didn't have a driver's license. I do know that.
That's exactly right. I deal with that a little bit in his chapter, and so just so your listeners know, with the exception of the first 2 introductory chapters and the last chapter that closes the book, all 16 chapters of the book minus 3 each chapter is dedicated to the character in the movie and the actor who played that character. So I did a chapter dedicated to Deputy Winslow as portrayed by Jack Marks. And as I was actually writing the book, or in preparation for, I can't remember, Jack Marks passed away. And this is in the book, but Bill Randolph went to Jack Marks's funeral because he teaches a class in the building in which Jack Marks lived. And he went and spoke at Jack Marks's funeral, commemorating their shared history of Friday the 13th Part 2 from 40 years earlier. They had never spoken from the day of filming until the day of Jack Marks's death. Bill and Jack never spoke, even though they're the only 2 to really share any screen time together. Remember, it was Deputy Winslow who caught Bill Randolph's character Jeff trespassing, and they takes him back to Packanack Lodge. And I thought it was just a really moving tribute that Bill Randolph would take the time to go to Jack Marks's funeral, not only to attend, but to speak and to eulogize the man for their shared history in Friday the 13th Part 2. I thought that was a class act, and so I had to write about that as well.
Oh, beautiful. I want to talk a little bit too about Marta Kober. Okay. What was she like to talk to? Because she's somebody I would have loved to have gotten on here too, but I know she was. I love that kill scene, by the way.
Yeah. So I did not get a chance to interview Marta. She unfortunately was a no-show in Atlanta when I was supposed to meet her and also work alongside her. So what I did was I interviewed, obviously at length, Bill Randolph, who spent every scene. They're in every scene together except one, and that's when she finds the Crystal Lake sign, right? Other than that, they're in every single scene together. So I interviewed Bill at length about their experience, and of course, I relied on what few tribal interviews there exist out there with her. And I relied on those interviews to paint a picture of who the woman is today. She's had some troubles.
Yeah.
She's had some troubles over the years, so she's not easily accessible. She will do the occasional convention, but it's a rarity. It's a rarity. So I relied on Bill Randolph's testimony in
Okay.
in interviewing him about Marta, and
Hmm.
also some historical interviews that she gave years ago, just to kind of paint the picture of who she is today. And you know what? I think I did a pretty decent job. I'll tell you the hardest part about that book to write: Walt Gorney, Tom McBride, Jack Marks, and then I'm going to throw in Marta Kober, because those four people were not accessible.
Hmm.
Three of them are dead.
Yep.
So if you're going to write a definitive retrospective on each one of these actors and their characters, you have to do a lot of research if you can't rely on them to give interviews. And so I had to do a lot of research in terms of historical interviews, and then do a lot of interviewing of the cast. Walt Gurney was the hardest because he is not on record at all about Friday the 13th Part 2. Never given
Yep.
an interview. So I had to rely again on Bill Randolph, who spent a lot of time with him. You remember the scene in Friday the 13th Part 2 where he's in the phone booth.
Yep.
Right. So they spent a day filming together. So I had to rely a lot on secondhand information in order to build chapters around those four individuals who were not available to me. Jack Marks, Walt Gorney, and Marta Kober came off really well. Tom McBride came off well too, because I got to rely on Lauren Marie Taylor, who spent a lot of time with him. But that was the hardest part about writing the book, was those four chapters. The rest was piece of cake because I had access to the actors. And anyways, so yeah.
I really like Adrienne King. She was my second interview I ever did on this podcast back in 2015, and I got to meet her at Frightmare in the Falls last year. I got a nice photo of giving her a hug, and
She's the
she
real
is love.
deal.
I love Adrienne King. I got a signed Friday the 13th script from her and a couple signed photos, and but
She loves her fans, and that's what I love about her.
well, here's a funny thing with her, and she loves to deny this, but it's there. That's Alice's corpse at the end. That is her corpse, and
She's dead.
you
She's
got
dead.
Terry there, and you got Deputy Winslow there.
Mhm.
I often wonder, and I'm kind of hoping the Crystal Lake television series goes into this.
Mhm.
I often wonder if there was more bodies, because there's a 5-year period in between parts 1 and 2. I wondered, if there's more bodies in there.
Well, so that's interesting. So what you have is, if you want to know chronologically, you have Sackhead Jason before he was actually Sackhead. You have Jason killing Jason killing Alice 2 months after the beheading of his mother.
Yep.
Then the chronology suggests that for the next 4.5 years, Jason went silent. He was living in the shack, living in the woods, and it wasn't until Packanack Lodge opened next door, nearby Camp Crystal Lake, that he went on his very first murder spree. So it would seem chronologically there aren't any other bodies, unless you're talking about animals that he lived off of. But in terms of human bodies, if to say of any that he killed any hitchhikers or trespassers, there's nothing in the canon that would suggest that. For all intents and purposes, he really didn't start his crusade until part 2. And with the killing of not Alice, that was just that happened 2 months after the death of his mom.
Mm-hmm.
But the first kill would be Deputy Winslow, I think it was.
Crazy Ralph.
Was it Crazy Ralph? Was he before Deputy Winslow
Yep.
at night? Okay, gotcha.
Yep.
Thank you.
But
Yep.
he wasn't in the shack, though. Deputy Winslow and Terry was. We don't get
Yeah.
to see what happened to Terry, but if you look closely,
Yeah.
it looks like there's a blood patch on the side of her head.
That's what they say. They say now. So if you talk to actress Kirsten Baker,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll read this in the chapter, but I don't know if I put this in the chapter or not. She wants to suggest that her character survived, that she just had a thumping. Terry just had a thumping on the head, and she bases that theory on the fact that if you look at Terry's body, I mean, she doesn't remember filming the scene either, by the way, where her body's laying in the shack. She doesn't remember filming that. Obviously, she was there, though, but she just can't remember it 40 years later. But she argues, hey, there's no blood on me. So I'm not really dead. But as you just wisely pointed out, Greg, if you zoom in on HD, rumor has it, I have not done this, but it is said you see blood on her head. So
I've seen this before it was HD.
yeah,
I see
right.
it back when
Yep.
it was VHS.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Oh
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I could see that. But so talk about your impressions on meeting these people. Like
Yeah.
um I know you enjoyed meeting every one of these people, but who were the ones that made the biggest who was the biggest surprise that you met out of this
Man,
bunch?
I'll be honest with you, all of them were surprising, but Russell Todd
Hmm.
surprised me because I assumed, as a former model, actor, real good looking guy, very well to do in life today, successful business owner, I figured that he would be offstandish, but no, he was I mean, very arm opening, embraced me, and my brother to a lesser extent, but embraced me. We became professional colleagues. I mean, we text back and forth every now and then. And so we've got that relationship that goes beyond so that was a big surprise. The other one was John Fury, because John Fury is very intimidating in person. He's a lot bigger in person than he looks on screen. And I felt very little. By the way, same thing with Warrington Gillette. Warrington Gillette's pushing 6'2".
Hmm.
So is John Fury. These are big men. And so I was a little bit intimidated by John Fury because he's 70 years old now.
Oh wow.
When I first met him, he had just flown in from the West Coast or whatever. So he was a little on the, for lack of a better word, the cranky side. And that was intimidating. But he immediately dropped his guard. He was he's a cool guy. He was very joking with me, and so he surprised me. I was expecting a cantankerous curmudgeon old guy,
Hmm.
just no, that's not John Fury at all. He works the room, he works the audience. Um, Bill Randolph, Russell Todd, those guys all surprised me about how warm they are to their fans, and how they'll look you in the eye. They're not trying to move the line along. They want to hear your story. They want to talk to you as a person, not just a fanboy. So I guess, but if I had to pick one name, I think my biggest surprise was Russell Todd. I would have to say. I mean, they all blew me out of the water. Seriously, there's not a jerk among them. I'm not kidding you. They're all sweethearts. They love their fans. They love what they do, and they're thankful for our support. And so when you're there, they treat you really well. Now, I'm not talking about me as a volunteer. I'm talking about the fan that comes up to the table. They're just really good people. But Russell Todd surprised me the most, I think, just being real. And I actually write about that in the book. I write
Hmm.
about that in his chapter. I start off by basically saying what I just said to you now, that I thought that I was in for a long night, and not at all. He ended up becoming he was very helpful to me in the promotion of the book as well. And he gave me a good interview as well. And I got to use some of our personal private conversations in that as well. So Russell Todd was the biggest surprise. Sorry for the long-winded answer, but that's
Oh,
it.
no worries, no worries.
Okay.
That's what people want to hear. So, are you going to do another other one of these?
I can neither confirm nor deny.
Okay.
I can neither confirm nor deny. I will say this.
Uh,
I won't be coy about it. I wasn't planning on writing another one. Um,
hmm.
I I love the first four movies
Yeah.
for different reasons for each one. My wife is not a horror fan at all. She doesn't get it. It doesn't make sense to her. She just rolls her eyes. But I will be honest with you, Greg. The book has done better than I anticipated that it was going to do, and it's done better, and it's been received better than my wife anticipated. And she actually said to me the other night, we were in the hot tub, we were just kind of relaxing, and she said, the woman that rolls her eyes when I do this kind of stuff, right? She looked at me. She said, "So you're going to write another one, right?" I go, what? You want me to write another one? She goes, yeah, I want you to write another one. And I said, okay. So, but that being said, I'd be lying to you if I said that I haven't been slowly putting some words down on paper.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll be so frank as to say that the focus is on. I'm looking at part 3 right now. Part 3 is what I love about part 3. There's a lot of things that frustrate me about part 3. I want to be very clear, namely around the continuity issues. But I loved Richard Brooker's Jason. I love that incarnation. Like I said earlier at the onset of our interview, that's the version that scares the daylights out of me in my dreams. And so, anyways, I've been putting down a few words on paper and working with some interviews and trying to line a few things up. So,
Tracy Savage makes me dreamy.
I
I've
got to
interviewed Dave.
I got to work with her. I got to work with Tracy in New Jersey last year, and yeah, very very sophisticated woman, real pro. And I thought that she would be, because she's a professional journalist. Now she's a college professor. So I'm thinking, oh, she's going to kind of be a little, maybe a nose up in the air a little bit, maybe not too engaged with this scene. Nope. She had a blast. She's very forthcoming. Yeah. So real class act. I don't blame. Please forgive me. I'm sorry. Did you say that you had Tracy on this show?
I've had David Kadams on once. I've had
Yeah.
Tracy Savage on 4 times.
Okay. Gotcha.
And on Boxing Day, all 4 times.
Well, maybe you can put in a good word for me. I think that she remembers who I am, but maybe not. But I'll talk. I certainly. I know I'll talk with Stacy as well, obviously. But I really look forward to picking her ear about part 3, if and when it ever comes to that.
My biggest frustration with part 3, and I've talked to Tracy about this, is they announced Debbie as being pregnant.
Yeah.
I would have made her the final girl. Because she had this calm, cool demeanor. She was the only one of the group that didn't shit all over Shelley.
Right. Yeah.
Nothing against Dana Kimmel, but Chris was not likable.
Yeah. Chris is my least favorite final girl. So this is how I rank the first 4. I call for part 1 the classic. For me, part 1's the classic, part 2's the favorite, part 3's the iconic one, and part 4's the best one. That's how I tend to rank them. Okay. And when it comes to part 3, and I'm writing a pretty good expose on it, I struggle with the final girl, the ways that she's characterized. I struggle with the continuity. I struggle with the West Coast location, and the final girl, Dana Kimmel. I guess part 3, if I were to really shoot a hole in it, they willingly compromised the acting and character development for the sake of the 3D gimmick. And in part 2, what makes part 2 stand out, heads and tails, along with part 4 too, by the way, is the character development. In part 2, there's not one character you don't like in part 2. Not one. They're all likable. You don't want to see any of them die. For the most part, that's part 4, except for maybe Teddy. He could be a snot, right? But for part 4...
Yeah, but he was the last American virgin. Come on.
I know. I'm just telling you. But part 2 and part 4, even part 1, had decent character development. Part 3, they're just there for fodder, to be killed. And I'm frustrated with that aspect. And so at the same time, they also lowered the bar in terms of the acting. And all the cast admit this. Tracy Savage is on record stating as much. Larry Zerner, I believe, is on record stating as much. And it's a little bit pronounced when you watch it 40 years later. So I'll deal with that in the book, but at the same time, it's going to be a celebration of what I consider to be the iconic entry in the franchise.
Yeah, I would have made Debbie the final girl.
I get it.
Yeah, I would have. And how about a pregnant final girl? I think that would have been cool. It's like they forgot about it midway through the movie.
Right.
You know, those...
It's just one passing reference. And again, there's a lot of problems with the script when it comes to character development and follow through. But as far as I'm concerned, they make up for it with an incredible version of Jason. So
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, do you ever get to sell these at the cons?
So I work with C&V Promotions, which is Stacy.
Mhm,
She also represents me.
mhm.
We did take them to Monster Mania. I think, excuse me, we took 15 of them, also to Creature Feature, and yeah, we sold them all. And we don't sell them separately. They have to. They sell with the talent. So in other words, Amy still had them on her table. And if a customer wanted the book, they get the autograph as well. And that's a $50 charge. And Amy signs it. And yeah, we sold out of them at Monster Mania and Creature Feature, I think it was. So yeah, we'll see
You
if that
had
we'll see if we continue to let them be available at the conventions or not. So we'll see.
I'm going to assume you got a lot of, signatures and a copy of your own?
Well, you know what? Believe it or not, I don't. I don't. But I'm hoping to in the not too distant future. If I just Lauren Marie Taylor had me on her podcast, which was an honor of a lifetime for a fanboy like me.
Mhm.
And obviously, Bill wrote the foreword to the book. Amy has been an absolute champion, as has Russell Todd. Um, and so I just haven't had the book came out January 5th, I think. I haven't really come up for air yet. But
No.
I do plan on having them. I'll let here's a little secret. I actually have a poster of the book. It's a promotional poster.
Mhm.
Um, and it's just for me for my office, 24 by 36. And I'm having the cast sign that. And I got Amy's to sign it on at Monster Mania because again, she's very supportive of the book, as has Lauren Marie Taylor, and I'll have them sign that probably more so than a copy of the book. But I'll still hopefully get them to sign a copy of the book too. But yeah, I just haven't really gotten around to it, but I need to. I need to. So
So, I would reach out to Stacey Lee if I want to connect with any of these people for my show,
that is correct. She represents them all except Warrington Gillette in terms of the part two cast. Yeah,
Okay.
she's the way to go. So.
So I'd love to have Amy on, and I'd love to eventually have Kirsten Baker on. Boy,
She does not do a lot of interviews. Um, and she's hard to land.
yeah.
So yeah, but hey, if you want it to happen, Stacy's the gal. That she's their agent. So
Okay. And the only one
yeah.
I've had from part four is Ted White. I'm so glad I got him.
Yeah.
So glad I got him. I got him twice, and
Well,
sadly he's
I'll let
gone.
you in on a little secret.
Uh,
I got to work at Monster Mania with Kimberly Beck for the weekend, and along with your partner in crime, Bob Heckman, director of Victim No More, and um, he did a preponderance of the work. But I got to meet her. She was such a sweetheart, and I'm trying to build up a rapport with Peter Barton,
hmm
and he's kind of he's a social media presence, but he's not a convention presence. And I'm trying to build up a rapport with him. I would love to interview him one day for part
hmm
four. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
part four.
I love part four as well. I actually my favorite shot in the entire franchise is where Heb White as Jason is at the top of that stairwell, and Trish Jarvis, played by Kimberly Beck, is facing him, and she's just panting and panting. You can hear her, and she looks behind her, and there's the window, and it's like, I gotta take the lesser of the two evils.
Yeah,
And she runs out through that window, and it's slow motion. Trish Jarvis to me is easily one of the most underrated
yeah,
final girls ever
yeah,
because she gives Jason a lot of battle damage. And everybody gives Corey Feldman as Tommy all the credit. But I'm like, I don't think he could have done it by himself.
right, exactly. No, I agree with you. I love
Like,
Trish Jarvis.
I'm working on getting her now.
That's your favorite scene. You want Kimberly Beck,
Mm-hmm.
Stacy Lee, all right?
Stacey Lee.
Kimberly, Bob Heckman,
Mm-hmm.
um, um, help transition Kimberly back to Stacy CMV Promotions. So I would recommend you speak with her if you want to get to Kimberly Beck. Kimberly Beck is she's a professional to this day. Her husband's a producer, so not always easy to land. So again, that's the best way that I would recommend.
Actually, I've been in talks with Kimberly because I was made connection through Bob. But
okay, that makes sense. Okay, gotcha.
But I haven't landed it yet, and I'm hoping. That's the thing is, like I did 25 interviews through 13 Fanboy, and I've had a few bad experiences through some names I'm not going to bring up here, who didn't seem to appreciate my contribution, I guess. Bobby Heckman really appreciates my contribution to Victim No More. He really, really appreciated it, and I'm hoping I'd love to get Kimberly back on here, and expand my Part 4 interviews, but I've had a lot of the Friday the 13th people on here, so
I got to tell you, I've been incredibly impressed with your repertoire, with your resume, and who you've had. I mean, you've done a lot of good work for as Warrington Gillette would call it, for the brand, right? You've done a lot of good work for the franchise. This is a community. We're a unique community, and you've become a prevalent presence in that community. Based on the people that you've interviewed. So I think and like I said at the onset of this interview, 5 times I cite your interviews in my book because they were helpful to me. So whether or not you had 100 views, 5 views, or 1 million views, you helped me, and that got in print. And those quotes have seen a broader audience. So thank you. Your reach goes beyond YouTube is what I'm getting at.
Well, I got them on Spotify now too, or Anchor podcast. So I'm slowly trying to expand my reach a little bit, and but a lot of times if somebody's passed away, I do tribute interviews. I've had Alfred Hitchcock's granddaughter on the show, and Audrey Hepburn's eldest son's been on, and I did 5 on Zoe Tamerla's Lund from Miss 45 with her widow, and that was interesting. Yep.
You want to hear? Do you know who Peter Anthony is?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I was on his podcast last month, and he brought on as a surprise guest. I was on his podcast in promotion of the book, and he brought on as a surprise guest Steve Dash's grandson, and his daughter was watching and listening to because it was live. So I got to interact with them a little bit, and I thought that was kind of cool. So
that was kind of cool. What do you think of the fan films like Never Hike Alone, which I actually thought was very good, and stuff like that?
With all due deference to Peter Anthony and Bob Heckman and their respective films, which I stand by and appreciate, Never Hike Alone is my favorite. And again, with all due deference to Victim No More and Vengeance 2 and all and 9 Lives, Jason 9 Lives, produced by Alex Edwards, all of which I totally appreciate and get into, and all of which I thought were pretty impressively made. Never Hike Alone, I thoroughly enjoyed. I thought the ending got a little drawn out. I can review all I want to, but I like Never Hike Alone. I'm not a huge fan of fan films, to be honest with you, and I don't know why. I don't know why I'm like that. Maybe because I'm a little bit snobbish. I don't know. But I Never Hike Alone 2, Never Hike in the Snow. That was like 45 minutes long. I didn't feel like that was I feel like that was kind of just a placeholder or something like that. But yeah, I really enjoyed Never Hike Alone, as I also enjoyed the other ones that I just mentioned, including the ones by Peter Anthony and Bob Heckman. But Never Hike Alone was one that really stood out to me, had an impact on me. Thought it was a great story, and should have been and could have been picked up by any major studio as far as I'm concerned, in terms of the storyline. I just really appreciated that. So
I think
I never did see 13 Fanboy though. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to bring it up. All right, we'll move on.
You know what I thought was a well-made movie?
Yeah.
But like I said,
Yeah, we'll move on.
I got blacklisted from it because I thrown a charity challenge out, and some uh text were sent my way that I wasn't privy to, and they were sent by somebody that was involved with the film that felt I should know what's being said about me behind my back, and
I'm sorry, I didn't mean
yeah,
to bring it up. I apologize.
yep. So
But look
yeah.
on the bright side. Look at the footprint that you are leaving in terms of your podcast and the people that you've had access to. I mean, landing Tracy Savage 4 times is no small thing for an interview,
Mhm.
and you're very disarming. You're very inviting to talk to, and you play a key part in rallying the community. That is our horror community, our Friday the 13th community. So I would choose to focus on that rather than a bad experience with that. I'll leave it
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah. But I'm gonna hopefully move past that. I haven't been
Yeah.
involved in any of these projects since and it's
Yeah,
yeah.
you heard that Bob Heckman was toying with the idea of a sequel to Victim No More.
Oh, I thought he was gonna make a sequel to The Apple.
Well, based on a post that I saw, and he's probably going to watch this or listen to this, so he can correct me if I'm wrong and if I'm misleading the audience. I am eternally sorry, but I'm pretty sure that he's toying with the idea of a Victim No More storyline, and he's in the beginning stages of mapping that out. So, hopefully, you can help play a role with that as well, kind of rebound from the bad taste in your mouth from that other adventure or
Yeah, misadventure, yeah. Oh well. But yeah, Tracy Savage is awesome. I love her. Yeah. But nonetheless, I did want to ask though, is there anybody else you met at the cons that just kind of stood out to you?
Friday the 13th related or not related?
Either way, either
Yeah.
way.
Well, the thing that I have, good or bad?
Both, actually.
Okay. All right.
I haven't had a bad experience.
Yeah.
You know, I was lucky last year to meet Caroline Monroe, who I've had on the show back
Yeah.
in 2016, and meeting her was a wonderful privilege, you know. But
I have not had any bad experience with the talent either that I'm working with or the talent that I've met at conventions. However, I will say that I've been able to pick up on who's fake and who's real. And I haven't run across a lot of fake people, but there's been a couple of people that I'm like, you are a self promoter. That is all that you are. And it is all about the dollar bill, and it is all about your reputation. Um, and I'm not going to mention their names, but
oh, I know one.
there's only been two where I'm like, well, that person's just they're just a self promoter. They are living off of these conventions, and they're going to milk it dry. But everybody else, other than that, though, every castmate that every celebrity that I've met thus far, I haven't gone to a lot of conventions, maybe 4 or 5. Um, I've always been pleasantly surprised. At Monster Mania, working with Kimberly Beck, alongside Kimberly Beck for Stacy's team, I also got to work with Brooke Smith from Silence of the Lambs. She was the woman in the well. All right.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I actually, my wife and I, at we had to take her to Brooklyn. She had to get to Brooklyn, so we drove her there from New Jersey, and I got to that was a 2-hour drive. And these people are really nice people. They're human beings. When they get cut, they bleed. They're human beings. They're no different than you and I. And
Hmm.
so I haven't had any bad experiences personally. And there's only been 2 celebrities that I've seen that I thought, I think they're a little on the fake side. But other than that, it's mostly positive, mostly. So that's the best answer
Okay,
I can give you.
there you go. Well, you know what? I am really enjoying this book to get to show up here. Showing up here, Sackhead, the definitive retrospective on Friday the 13th, part 2. Yes. How long did it take you to write that?
So I actually studied the movie for 2 years. Writing it actually from the very first word to the final word was about 5.5 months.
Mm-hmm.
So overall, I would say it was a 2.5 year project. When I studied the movie for 2 years, however, I didn't know it was going to end up in a book. That's not why I was studying it. I was studying the movie because of the Facebook group that I run. But
Mm-hmm.
once I gained all of this tribal knowledge, I decided to put it in book form, and that took about 6 months. And just so that your viewers and listeners know, I was fortunate enough to have Bill Randolph, who played Jeff in part 2. He graciously wrote the foreword to the book.
Oh, yeah.
He read every word of it, corrected a few things, gave me some deep cuts that were unbelievable, and I'm forever indebted to him. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, you know what? I have enjoyed having you come on here this evening,
Not as
and
much as I've enjoyed it, Greg. And I mean that sincerely. I mean that sincerely because I think that you are a great ambassador for this franchise of ours that we love so dearly. You were a help to me in the writing of the book indirectly. I had no idea that when I was citing your podcast 5 times over 2 chapters, that I'd actually have the privilege to be able to speak with you. So I thank you, good sir. And the pleasure has been all mine. And I mean that sincerely.
I couldn't believe it when you said that you cited. And I went back and I looked, and I was like, "Gee, my name isn't here." I'm like, "That's kind of cool."
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
I
Thank you so much.
I am loving that. I am loving that. Well,
Same.
before I let you go, would you mind doing a plug for my show?
Absolutely. What do you want me to say exactly? How's the best way to say it?
Just state your name and say you're the author of this book, and say you're listening to Greg Gilbert on Python's Paradise.
Okay. Hey, everybody, this is Ron Gann, also known as R.G. Henning. I am the author of Sackhead, the definitive retrospective on Friday the 13th, Part 2. You are listening to Greg Gilbert's Python's Paradise podcast. This is where the cool kids are hanging out. This is what the cool kids are listening to. You should too.
And cool kids, we mean Bill Randolph as well.
Exactly. The coolest of the cool.
Oh, yeah. Oh, well.
Thank you, brother. I really do appreciate your time, man.
I thank you too. Thank you so much for coming on here today. And yeah, I'll send this to you whenever it's ready. And yeah, post it anywhere you want.
Thanks, brother. God bless you, man.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye bye.